Have you ever traveled to a new body of water and wish you had a little bit of inside information from the locals or guides that fish that? Well, now there's an option to do that. This week on the OneCast, we're joined by Austin, the dream catcher, and one of his partners, Adam, to talk about how FishTips started and how you can buy tips to be successful on the water.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.
What is going on, OneCast fans? Welcome to another week with the OneCast, another episode, whatever you want to call it. We're here in studio. I have Ben and Trey. I'm Pete, as always. We're here in studio this week, record another episode. I'm going to say it another time, probably. Just kidding. As always, we're going to start off with that shameless plug. Make sure you head to onecastfishing.com. Use the code TheOneCast, all one word at checkout, save 10%. Get hooked up with your snagless jigs, your long neck hooks, your weedless Neds. Also coming soon, we're going to have some soft plastics available on there. So
yeah, we're going to bring back the original lineup of soft plastics and probably a couple other designs as well. So,
but the soft plastics that you're bringing back are going to pair perfectly with those snagless jigs and with those long neck hooks and with those weedless Neds. So there's no question as to what soft plastic you need to use when you're exposing that soft plastic on the back of those hooks.
Absolutely. And as we've been doing for the last few weeks, I want to talk about, an event that's going on, Lake Murray down there in South Carolina. For His Glories Outdoors is putting on the second annual Guardian Classic, which is a veteran bass fishing tournament. I'll have everything linked down below for you to check out. $125 entry fee. They pair you with a veteran. If you have a direct family member, dad, daughter, son, brother that is serving, you can register so that you can fish together. You just have to reach out to For His Glory and let them know. Bobby Edwards is the guy's name. All the information will be linked below. Reach out to them if you can fish. That's going to be a great event. Get veterans on the water. Help thank them just another way for the sacrifices they've made for our freedoms. Guys, we all got.
Man, I'm going to tell you what, this is going to be a relatively quicker episode than all the listeners are typically used to. A, it's 9,000 degrees in here. And B, we want to give these guys an opportunity to kind of break down what they got going on. You know, there's a lot of animosity on social media about different things that are coming into the industry. And sometimes those counter like growing the industry, and we talk about growing the industry one cast at a time. Well, hey, that's the beauty of having the freedom to do this stuff, is like creating these cool businesses and stuff like that. So, for what it's worth, I think it's a cool idea. I'm sure that there's going to be some conflicts and stuff like that, but I'm interested to see what these guys got to say, Ben.
I 100% agree. We talked about FishTips a couple weeks ago in the episode. I think Pete was reserving judgment, but you and I think came down on the same conclusion. Like, it's another way for guys to be able to monetize and make money in the industry, particularly guides, tournament anglers, selling the information from a tournament or their body of water. It allows them to, put a little extra money, maybe pay the next tournament fee, pay the gas to get there, etc. Of course, there's been a lot of controversy in the social media realm, and I think we understand that because people, are going to jump to bad conclusions. People are just going to cheat and take information. So it's going to be great having both Awesome and Adam on here to talk about it, how FishTips started, what the intent is behind it, and I think we've got a lot of questions we want to get into the details a little bit to understand a little bit more.
Absolutely. And last thing before we go. We have some new artwork. I'm going to take the plexiglass off these because I see the reflections very bad, so you can't see them. We'll fix that for next week. Check out our socials. I have posts with those photos on there. Our friend Jeff Christensen, who also designed our logo, painted these photos. We have one with a crappie here, which was featured 2 years ago. It was the cover of the NC Wildlife calendar. This one is a bass in a river. I think it's got a worm in its mouth jumping. It's a beautiful picture. That one's going to be featured in the calendar this year. So 2024 coming out soon. Make sure you check him out. Kingfisher Designs is his company. It'll all be linked down below. I'll do a better blurb on him when we're not wasting time of our guests. Not that talking about him is a waste of time, but I want to record and make sure I do Jeff justice. So check that out. Check out the links below. And if you guys don't have anything else,
let's bring them on. Let's do it.
So Austin, y'all have it down, man. The intro is amazing.
We appreciate that. We have to run it about 67 times. No, I'm just kidding. Dude, honestly, at the very beginning of this, like you can imagine, I mean, we had to clear our throats and, stop recording and do it over and over and over. But, it's muscle memory. So once you get into the groove, you're kind of good to go at this point.
Yeah, we're going on.
Actually, go ahead, Pete.
No, I was going to say we're going on. I think this is 28 or 29 weeks, something like that, right? 28 episodes. Yeah. I went back the other day just to listen to like the first one, and it is rough to listen to.
Cringe.
That anybody downloaded those first couple episodes, I thank them. But it's pretty cool to grow and kind of get better every week and grow our following and sort of what you guys have going on. You're getting out there, you're getting your company out there and getting FishTips, the name out there. And I know you've done a bunch of these podcasts and you've done Facebook Lives and all of that stuff to try to cool the temperature, I guess is one way to put that. Because when it first came out, I think everybody made a video with their opinion without really knowing what it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of cooling the temperature, let's put some context behind what we're going to talk about today. And for either of you guys, if you want to break it down, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so FishTips is a marketplace online where highly dialed in local anglers, guides, professional fishermen can monetize their intellectual property by selling to other anglers on the platform. So it's a marketplace, no different than Airbnb, like Uber Eats, Toro, you name marketplaces. It's a marketplace just like that, where we are connecting buyers and sellers that both want something. So FishTips is that in the fishing industry. And like you said, it's like been a boiling pot and everyone's got opinions about it, but it has been a fun ride thus far for sure.
Yeah. And I'd say that in general, the overall theme of what we're talking about is how to make better memories on the water for anglers and how to financially support the people in the industry that are working hard to help anglers do that.
I think that's a great way to put it. And I think we need to apologize because we just jumped in here. I don't think we introduced everybody yet or allowed Austin and Adam to introduce themselves to the listeners out there. So if you guys want to do that, and then we can get into how FishTips came about, but kind of your background, whether you enjoy fishing as a hobby or it's what you do for a living, just kind of give everyone an idea of you all as the founders and background behind FishTips.
Adam, you go first.
All right. Adam Bloomston grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, went to the University of Alabama. Don't hold that against me. Moved to Atlanta in about 2000, and I've probably always had some sort of startup since I can remember, whether it was in high school washing cars, and college making T-shirts for bars and restaurants and fraternities, and then all sorts of other stuff out of college. And then my longest business, the one I'm still a part of, is called PayRock. It's a payments company. Been in the credit card processing business for about 20 years now. We started that company out. We bootstrapped it out of my business partner's basement. Didn't start with any money and started knocking on doors and grew it one customer at a time. We were able to grow into different cities and acquire different technologies and sell them in. So whether it was a point of sale equipment at a restaurant, a bar, or an online registration form for a camp, whatever it was, we were able to do all sorts of different kinds of credit card processing for different customers out there. And today that company's now 20 years old. We've got 800 or 900 employees across the globe and about 150,000 different customers out there. Awesome. So that's kind of the business background. And then let's talk about fishing, because that's the fun stuff. I've been fishing my whole life. My grandfather handed me a fly rod on his little lake up near him in Kansas City, and we would use poppers and catch bass when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. And I've been fishing ever since, whether it's bass or I love saltwater now. I've been chasing tarpon a lot. I just got back from Cuba where a guy on our trip got the Grand Slam. in a day. But,
Awesome.
we were chasing permit and tarpon, and I love bone fishing down in the Bahamas. And I love bass fishing. I love going out west and trout fishing, especially, we'll get into in a minute. That's why I'm at Austin up in the Western North Carolina part. But I've belly crawled almost every stream in North Georgia and Western North Carolina with a 3-weight rod, catching little brookies and stuff before. And I guess I'll probably pause the story there, Austin, before we get into the story. We can come back with that. You go ahead and just do an intro maybe, and then we'll jump into.
Hang on, Adam. I feel like I'm dressed for the occasion to be down in the Bahamas and chasing whatever it is. All right.
You are, for sure.
For those who can't see me, I got my Hawaiian shirt on, and I feel like Adam has just invited me to go down and chase some crazy saltwater fish. So I don't want to interrupt. So
done. We got to work on that sock tan of yours. We're not going to wear any shoes, so there won't be a sock tan.
Yeah.
And just Trey's got the Hawaiian shirt on, but I do have a Puerto Rico shirt on.
Yeah, so that's right.
We can go out there too.
We're international.
There's down there.
Yeah, I went last year, and I know this is a tangent. We didn't do saltwater fishing, but I went on a guided trip for peacock bass down there. So that was a lot of fun.
That is
so in Puerto Rico.
In Puerto Rico, yep.
Oh wow! Okay.
So we got Adam. Adam, I guess we could classify Adam as a buyer, and then we have Austin, the dream catcher, who's been guiding for a long time. We're gonna let him tell a story, but I guess we could call you a seller. So from your from your side, introduce yourself and
absolutely. So I was a pretty good baseball player all through my youth career. I was Maryland Gatorade Player of the Year. It's awarded to the best high school player of that specific sport my senior year in high school. But I was just always competitive, always loved the outdoors. I was raised on Lake Wiley in South Carolina. Then we moved to Maryland. I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay. And I had this just inherent desire for competition. And then Dad had started a junior Bassmaster club called the Junior Performance Fishing Team, of which there's been just some unbelievable anglers, college national champions, Elite Series anglers, BPT got like just tons of guys come out of that club. And anyways, I went to Western Carolina on a baseball scholarship. I ended up getting hurt my sophomore year at Western, ended my career, doubling the gap against Wake Forest. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I loved to fish. And my high school baseball coach, he had told me something, though. He had said, go to a place you're going to love in case you got hurt. Well, I got hurt, and I fell in love with the mountains because there was so many rivers and lakes and everything. Well, little did I know, there was a DVD called The Southern Trout Eaters. These guys were filming North Georgia, Western North Carolina, East Tennessee, upstate South Carolina, throwing these big trout swim baits. Well, I was like, holy cow, they just packed up shop. They made the video and left. And I'm like, I started doing some market research, and I was like, holy cow, like there's over 5,000 vacation rentals on lakes alone. So like they left this giant hole in the market for a fishing guide service. So I started Dreamcatcher Guides literally 2013 while I was a sophomore in college. And then it grew rapidly. And then all of a sudden I'm like, holy cow, I need to start a tackle shop because I'm buying so much tackle. I'm looking at my expenses, and I'm an entrepreneur just like Adam is. I love fishing though. I'm like a fishing bum that is like figured out how to make a living fishing. And we have a great business. We do about 400 guide trips a year. We do about $1 million a year in revenue. I've got 3 full-time employees. They guide, rig boats, the whole shebang. So, it's a really good deal. And I absolutely love it. I mean, when I think about my life, like I fished in the Junior Bassmaster Classic at age 13. My boater was Boyd Duckett, another very polarizing entrepreneur in this industry. Eric Galasso, Epic Eric, who I don't know if you guys would know him through Instagram or anything. He's one of my business mentors, fishing mentors. So I've always been surrounded by entrepreneurs, people who love to fish. And I'm like, everyone, when they retire, they want to fish. So I'm like, well, screw that. How do I figure out how to retire when I'm 19? Let me figure out how to fish for a living. So I start Dream Catchers, and it takes off like crazy, and I'm doing a ton of trips. And then literally, man, I mean, we guide on Lake Chattooga, Lake James, Joe Cassie, Lake Kiwi, a lot of tournament lakes, a lot of lakes that have vacation rentals. And this is where we'll transition into FishTips. man, my phone would get, I mean, literally guys, today I screenshotted them. I don't know if you guys follow Dreamcatchers Fishing, which is my guide business and stuff, but I screenshot them and sometimes post like, this is ridiculous. So many people hit me up. Hey man, I'm coming into town. Where do I go? What do I throw? And I'm like, hey, do you want a guide service? No. Do you want to come by my tackle shop? Don't have the time. And I'm like, all right. So there's these people that value my information, but they want it for free. And they don't understand that I have so much time and money just behind all of, I mean, I'm a professional, guys. I'm a professional guide. It's what I do for a living. It's how I put food on the table. A doctor can't do a surgery for free. I can't just give my information for free. And anyways, I had taken Adam and Strickland, or I had taken Strickland out, and then I went out with Adam and Strickland, and we ended up blasting.
Strickland's my 13-year-old son.
Yeah. So we end up blasting, a couple 4.5, 5 pound largemouth, a couple 4 pound smallmouth, and Adam's super pumped up. And he's like, hey man, I want to go again in a couple weeks. And I'm like, dude, I'm booked up for like 4 months. Like I'm booked up till the rapture, bro. You're not getting on the And he goes, well, dude, I have my own boat. And I was like, oh, cool. Like I've been thinking of like, how do I monetize these people that are constantly beating me up for information? So anyways, Adam said, hey, how about I pay you like it was a guide trip, but you just kind of sell me the information. So he said, minus your expenses, your fuel. And he said, sell me a tip. So I sold Adam a tip for $200. And Adam went out, and it's very in-depth. It was like, hey, if the conditions are this, the fish are going to do this. If the wind blows from here, the fish are going to set up like this. And it was very educational and very fruitful because Adam went out and hammered them, texted me, was like, dude, that was really cool. And the light bulb went off. I mean, at the same time, we were like, whoa, I think we've got something. And I don't know, Adam, you want to add on?
Yeah, that's how it happened. We, I keep up with all these guides. You do the dance with these guides throughout the year. You book a trip, as the year goes on, you'll send them pics or whatever, or keep them laughing on, tell them some jokes. And because you know what you're doing as a buyer, right? You know that come the next trip, you want to hit up that guide and say, hey, I'm heading up there next week. Where do I go and what are they biting on and give me all the details. And you can't really, there's no in between. It's like either I got to book a guide service, a full day guided trip, which I do a lot, but the guide's not always available. And I don't have all the time in the world to spend, hours and hours online to research everything or to go pre-fish a body of water. So the idea is kind of roaming around in my head like, hey, there just needs to be a platform where I can just pay somebody for what's in their head. They don't have to spend the money on the boats and the fuel and the service and the marketing on ad clicks to get the customer to come to them in the first place. Like, just break it down. There's got to be a dollar amount because you're already giving it to me on the trip anyway. I'm already in your boat. You're teaching me everything on the boat anyway. You're showing me the spots. You're showing me the knots. You're showing me the lures. You're talking to me about water clarity and clouds and everything anyway. So I'm kind of floating the idea around in my head. I do the dance with the guides. I feel a little guilty because I'm like, in my head, I'm like, well, I'd pay somebody $50 or a couple $100, especially depending on the body of water and the species. We haven't even broached saltwater yet. This just has kind of exploded with bass, which is about 70% of the marketplace anyway. But regardless of how much people will pay, it's like, hey, look, it's a little awkward. I'd pay you. And then the guides of the world are like, yeah, it's a little awkward in their mind because they're like, I want to make sure you come to me again when you're ready to book a full trip or come into my bass store, my fly fishing shop. I don't want that to be weird. So there's this like awkward arm's length transaction that's trying to take place, but there's not a comfortable place. There's not an environment. There's not a platform. There's not a marketplace where a network effect can begin to happen where it's just common, right? Just like in Airbnb, there's not a common place for you to rent a room out. But as soon as they created it, now it's pretty normal. Anyway, so that was kind of that moment that Austin's talking about. That moment happened between us. I was like, man, this needs to be an online app, a marketplace. And he's like, I've been thinking about the same exact thing. This is exactly what you and me just dealt with. I'm like, I know. You and me just dealt with the same exact thing. And that was kind of the genesis of the idea. And Austin, as you can tell, has got amazing energy, and he's a great guy, and he's got this entrepreneurial degree, and he's a leader at his church, and he's an entrepreneur with multiple successful businesses, and so we just started rapping back and forth about it, and all of a sudden the idea, but we were talking about it like every other day, you know, and calling each other and texting each other ideas. And so the idea, that's kind of how it spurred from there. We both just kind of put our brains together on it. And then I said, all right, Austin, we gotta, if this is real, you know, first step is we got to have a business plan. And he's like, yep, on it. And I was like, you going to write this thing? And he's like, on it. And like within, you know, weeks, he sends me rough draft. I'm going back and forth with edits. He's going back and forth with edits. And he really led the charge there. And next thing you know, we've got like a legit business plan that made a lot of sense. And I said, Austin, you know, and all the startups that we do, you know, you kind of, it's this technology 101 startup thing. I was like, you got to do surveys, man. We can't, this is just you and me thinking, like, we got to do some surveys. We got to figure out how to like ask all these hard questions to a lot of people. I
totally forgot. I never talk about the surveys in these. I never talk about the surveys in these podcasts. I think talking about the survey statistics would like be astronomically eye-opening to people. But
it's
yes,
mind-blowing. So Austin's like, I got that too. I got 8,000 followers on Instagram. Watch this. And he just like posted some survey questions, and people, like, we were getting like 500 answers to each question, like within a day. And it was mind-blowing statistics. Like, Austin, I don't have them all memorized. Maybe you've got some of them in front of you, but it's like the average fisherman spends 3 hours researching a trip before they go fishing.
Yeah. So I'll talk about 60, some of them.
Yeah, go.
It was like, do you think being a fishing guide is a dream job? You know, yes or no? Because I wanted people to and I think 90% of people said yes, that being a fishing guide was a dream job. So they obviously aspire to be a guide or be in like in just a spot of knowledge in fishing. And then so I'm like, all right, that's cool. How often do you ask for information before trips? It was like 90% of people said like, yes, everyone asked buddies for information before trips. And then it was like, would you be willing to pay for information before trips? And then like 60% of people said yes. And then it was like, would you be willing to sell information after your trips? And about 60% of people said yes. So we automatically knew like, okay, this is like, there's going to be people that don't do it and are okay with it. And then people that are like, yeah, I see this. And back to Adam's deal, when you start thinking about like, okay, like I always like to lay out, like if time is money, if we can all agree that time is money, if you spend 3 hours doing research for a body of water, just call it for easy math. Let's say you spend your average wage is $50 an hour. You spend 3 hours. That means you spend $150 of your time to figure something out, and you still got to go figure it out. And then, you know, the light bulb started going off for us. Like, holy cow. Like when you started looking at all this data, you're like, wow, there is actually a market for buyers and sellers. And dude, I totally forget to talk about the surveys. The surveys are
I think that survey information is great, because when I look at it for me personally, as my anecdote, if I'm going to a new body of water and it's a destination lake, let's use that example, right? I don't know, Guntersville, Okeechobee, or right. And so like before I went to, or let's use the Harris Chain when I went down there for a couple of years ago, massive body of water. Of course, huge. I'm doing all the lake surveys. I'm looking at all the fishing reports that are there. I'm going on YouTube, looking at all the information. I'm going back to old, pro tournament circuits there, watching old videos. And I went down there in February around the time where all that information is relevant. But if I would have went down, say, in May or something, right, it can be completely different fishing. But on top of that, with the Harris Chain, I only been to Florida one other time. I was Okeechobee, completely right. Those bodies of water set up quite a bit differently. I'm going to Florida thing. I'm going to punch, right? I want to punch lily pads and do all that. No, and I went on Facebook groups and asked a few folks, and it got some good direction. No, they're offshore in Eelgrass, go up to Lake Griffin on the north end. And, you just have to find where the schools are at. And that's what we did for the next 7 days. And we were out there and caught a lot of fish that way. But I don't know if I would have, how many days it would have taken me to figure that out. If
You may not have ever figured
it may have never figured it out because I was on completely different lakes at that time, right? Because everything's connected there.
Yeah,
so.
and
and like, how many hours did you spend online, do you think, in the 3 weeks before, just Googling stuff and researching stuff?
Oh, all the time. And if I'm working, making lures or something, like I if I'm going to a place, I probably got YouTube playing in the background with different people on the lakes, or I try to find guides who are on the lake who publish content and all, because you try to soak it all up. But the problem is none of it's super, super current. And we all know how bass are.
Yep.
And it's especially true in Florida.
Oh,
they just move up and down like crazy, especially that time of year. So
And you said something that resonated with me because you talked about, like, Adam, you talked about folks hitting you up and wanting the information and all the time that you put into figuring that out and giving it away for free might be okay for a little while, but there comes a point. And Trey and I just had this conversation before talking to you, and now knowing a little more about FishTips, we're going to learn more. But Trey and I fish together a fair bit. We both live really close. So if he's on a lake and gets on them and he's like, hey, they're here, I'm like, well, pick me up at the ramp. Or if I'm out, he's picking me up at the ramp. So a lot of our stuff our social media stuff is together because we just end up fishing together a lot. Constantly we are getting messages from folks like, hey, I saw you were on Harris the other day. What were the fish doing? And, we're about, and the podcast is about, like, anglers helping anglers. But at some point, there has to be a return on your investment where we've spent the time out there finding the schools. And we may not be talking, but we spent the time out there catching the fish, figuring out what they want to eat, what they're doing, what weather conditions. We both have journals full of notes. Like, at some point in time, we have to stop giving that away. And that was like a light bulb for me when you said that, because we were just having this exact conversation. So if anybody's listening, like, that's what it's for. Like, we put in the time, we burn the fuel. We're not guides, but we're still out there in our free time fishing for fun. And I don't mind helping you, but at some point there needs to be some return on helping folks.
And I totally agree. I want to pay for it. I think anglers want to pay. They want to make sure you're financially supported. We get that, right? I mean, every angler, if you don't get it, something's wrong with you, right? But whatever it is that angler does for a living, you could be a brain surgeon, you could be a lawyer, you could be in sales, you could be pick in marketing, you could be an accountant, you could be in construction. It doesn't matter what it is. They do what they do for a living, and whatever that is, that equals a dollar amount of money that they get paid per hour. And that's kind of how all of our values per hour gets created. And I know that a guy like you has put in the time and effort on that lake. And there's a correlation on a graph that's like, hey, I work X amount per hour. I work 50, 60 hours a week. I'm willing to pay Y amount for what is probably going to take me 3 to 5 hours worth of work just to Google it and figure it out. But to tell you the truth, if I know it's an expert, someone who's hammering a lake, right, and I know that he's put in dozens of hours, I'm probably willing to pay more for that. And I want you to have that money, because at the end of the day, I just want better memories. That's what it comes down to. I just want to catch bigger fish. I want to catch more fish. I want to share these experiences with the people on my boat, which is normally my kids and my friends. I want to do it quicker. I want to do it faster, because I don't have my whole life to spend on the water. I wish I did. But I want to pay for that experience so that I can catch more fish. And at the end of the day, all that equals to, because it's going to be over. You're going to fish for a day. If you're lucky, you can fish for 4 or 5 days. It's all going to be over. And all you have are your memories.
I think
and photographs.
I think that's the important message here. Like, a lot of people, when you ask for information, they have all these reservations about giving it to you because they think you're going to go steal their fish for a lifetime. But a lot of people, just like you talked about, they only get out maybe once every couple months. Heck, sometimes people go fishing once a year.
That's
you
right.
know? And so when it comes to the adage of, if you do something well, don't do it for free, it applies in this situation. Now, there's a difference between hooking a buddy up with a couple waypoints and letting them know, like the three of us in here, we're going to tell each other stuff for free. But I can tell you, I just got off the lake today. There's about 6 different schools that I know that are on Sharon Harris Reservoir right now. I could probably sell you the locations for all 6 of those, right? But that is a reality because those 6 schools of fish are going to get so much pressure that it's going to, if I tell everyone where they're at, it's going to take away from my memories, right? But it could contribute to their memories. But
Totally.
It's an important thing to think about. And Pete's right. We just talked about that. And it was like, dude, we gotta stop telling everyone everything we know.
Yeah. I mean, because you and I found those schools. My dad came down. Trey and I had schools found. And as you guys know, you're fishermen, schools of fish move. So even that Saturday morning we went out, I still burned almost a half tank of fuel idling, finding where those schools were, figuring out how they were setting up before I fished them. And that was my money that I spent, and to just hand that in for like this is making so much more sense. I'm so glad we're talking about this.
Yeah, and it's that dollar amount. If someone could have just said, "Hey, you spent the same exact amount of time, right? Which is dollars," and could someone have just streamlined that and said, "Hey, they're just right here." That's you're going to exchange probably less money for it and make more memories faster.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this also touches on burning waypoints, because there's probably people, listen to this saying, oh, but you could burn all the waypoints. And then what if it becomes a community hole and things like that?
I want to talk about it as a seller. I want to talk about this as a seller, because I have something that none of you guys have in common is I'm in the fishing industry. I do this full time. I have an intimate, deep understanding for the last decade of literally putting the food on the table purely with my knowledge up here on how to stay on fish.
Yep.
So when I think about like all this stuff as a guide, do you guys think that people drive by me on a lake and drop waypoints on stuff I'm fishing?
Oh, 100%.
Absolutely. 100%.
Already happening. Do you think I've ever trained a guide that has become competition in a decade worth of guiding?
100%.
Absolutely.
So once again, like from my perspective, I'm like, here I am, like I have to figure out multiple sources of revenue. I have to be a spider in the middle of the web. If I'm a one-trick pony show, I don't give a crap what business you are. If you're a one-trick pony show, chances are you're not going to last long. Nobody just changes tires. They change tires, they change oil, they work on motor, whatever. You can't be a one-trick pony show. And in the fishing industry, where it's such a desirable industry to be in, there's a lot of money in it, but it's parceled out in so many ways. So if you're just a one-trick pony show, you can't do it. That's why these guys that are like, I'm a professional angler and I'm going to make a living tournament fishing. Mm-mm. I'm like, what? I was on Matt Pangrak's BTL Bass Talk Live. I said, Matt, how much money do you make on the opens annually? He said, Austin, I lose $20,000 a year.
Yep.
I lose $20,000 a year. So now listen, I'm a guide. So listen, man, we could go like deep into this, but the best way to make a living in the fishing industry, if you want to be a guide, tournament angler, is literally guide for $500 or $600 a day throughout the week, fish local big tournaments, win those big tournaments, and then guide. You stay at home, you stay local, you fish for $20,000 on the weekend, or you win maybe 3 or 4 of those a year, and you make about $75,000 guiding people. Like that's how you make it. So then I'm like, okay, well, let me do that, and then I've got a tackle shop and all these things. So it's just what I'm trying to say is you have to have multiple sources of revenue. You can't just do it, on your own. So for me, I'm like, all right, people are already trying to go around me. People are already, doing these things, whether it's like they're waypointing me, call them hole buzzards. My buddy Ben Milliken calls them hole buzzards, whatever. But I have to further monetize. Like I have to always continue to further monetize my knowledge. And I've got so much time idling and so much money spent on fishing line. And, you guys know how that is, yeah. But it's important for me. I'm like, hey, I've got to have multiple sources of revenue. And this is a whole spot that I'm missing out on. Like people desire this information. How do I monetize it?
Yeah. So. And when you look at professional anglers, which you're a professional angler, whether you guide, we did a whole episode on this, but nobody's making it maybe outside of Kevin Van Dam or Jacob Wheeler, and they're making it on deals that they've signed, right? Maybe outside of them, if you look at anybody, Gerald Swindle owned his construction company, contracting company. A lot of guys have plumbing companies or they own a landscaping business. Or you look at John Cruz with Missile Baits. the folks that are successful and do this for a long time don't just tournament fish. They all have something they guide. You're absolutely right. Lee Livesay guides down in Texas. Chris Zaldane guides and does all his media.
Destin guides on Lake Erie.
Destin the Marion, a friend of ours, guides on Lake Erie. Harvey Horn does a bunch of stuff outside of just fishing. You can't make it. And I try to tell this to young kids when they come and they talk to us, and we, we're lucky to know elite guys, and they ask, well, what do I have to do to get there? And I'm like, you need to have another job, and you need to really think about this, because I'm sure we all know, if you've been around it, somebody whose marriage has been destroyed, they've lost their house, they've had a truck or boat repoed, like they need to finish 50th to cash a $200 check to make.
I'm really good friends with a couple of the guys on the Elite Series. I'm not going to mention their names. They separately told me they took out unsecured loans for over $50,000 to pay entry fees to fish the Elite Series. I am like, dude, that absolutely shakes me up. Somewhere Dave Ramsey is rolling around. Like, I'm like, guys, that is the worst business plan I've ever heard. And man, I could talk about that all night, but I'm just like, guys, that is insane. So once again, like, how do you service that debt? That would be my immediate thought, is how do I service that debt outside of good finishes, right? Because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm thinking about cash flow. I'm like, all right, I've got a guide. I've got to do these things. I need multiple sources of revenue. So it's so huge for,
fish tips you come up with, these folks, there's people who you don't need to do a bunch of vetting on. If Ben Milliken puts in, information, it's going to be solid. You don't know me from Adam. If I want to, how do you vet me if I want to sell tips on fish tips? Like, how do you vet the folks that you don't personally know and ensure they're not giving bad information?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And before you go into the details, Austin, this was a major question we had
at the beginning.
From the inception of the business plan. It was absolutely something we were worried about. We want to make sure that a buyer knows who they're buying from and what the skill set is of that. What a buyer's buying from a seller. We want to make sure that we understand what the seller's skill set is. And when Austin and I started, we said, let's just start with expert guides, people, that are 100%, online and we can prove that they're a guide of some sort. And then that changed. We started getting hit up by some professional anglers, by some tournament anglers, and by weekend warriors. And then I can't tell you, there's been dozens of hours of meetings to figure out the different classifications. And then how are we going to do that now, because we're small? And then how is that going to grow at scale, as we get bigger? So Austin, why don't you talk a little bit about what we came up with and what the thoughts are there?
If somebody desires to be a seller on FishTips.com, they would go on and click Become a Guide. And when they click Become a Guide, you sign up immediately with your name and your email address. The next thing it does, it kicks you to our third-party payments platform called Stripe. And Stripe authenticates your name and a bank account. So now it has to be your legal name and your bank account. So if your legal name, bank account has to line up with your legal name on the platform. So there's the first verification. We want people to be Austin Neary is Austin Neary. We don't want Billy's Bad Bass Casters or whatever. We want like, hey, this is lined up. Like, even I actually sell on the platform as my business, Dreamcatcher Guides, and it's linked to a bank account that says Dreamcatcher Guides. Like, Dreamcatcher Guides LLC is my legal business entity. So you have to sign up through the bank account. The next thing is you then do a brief biography. Usually pretty quick, you can tell, like, if someone wants to take this serious or not based on what credentials they're putting on their biography. Mm-hmm. The next thing is we make them rate themselves. What are they? Are they a professional tournament angler? Are they just a tournament angler? Are they a professional guide? Are they a part-time guide? Are they a collegiate fisherman? Are they a weekend warrior? Are they a local expert? And we make them fill that out. The next thing, which is the biggest thing, it's 2023. If you do not have social credentials to back those up, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube channel, TikTok, something, we just can't verify you. There's just no way. If you're like, I fished on the BPT for 10 years, or it's not even been around for 10 years, but I go to your Instagram profile, but I go to your Instagram profile and it's cat pictures. Immediately, we're throwing up red flags. Like, you're not who you say you are.
Yep.
You know, and we actually have quite a few Bassmaster Classic qualifiers and a couple old, like they qualified back in the late 80s and 90s, and they got on our platform, and they're just kind of like local hammers now on their lakes in Texas, and then one I think's in like Ohio or Indiana, and they put Bassmaster Classic qualifier, and I was like, bull, like I don't believe it. And then I Googled their name, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this guy finished 10th in the Bassmaster Classic. And anyway, so it's been really cool, but like, so we authenticate your name, you kind of authenticate yourself, and then you have to do your social media platforms. And if you don't have those, dude, it's just really hard to prove you are who you are. That's just the reality of this industry. So then with that being said, because a lot of people are like, well, how do I know the sellers aren't just selling dog crap? Well, dude, I've got almost 10,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. We have 10,000 followers on our Instagram. We have 7,000 followers on our Facebook. I've been in business for 8 years through Dreamcatcher, through the tackle shop. I've had my guide business for 10 years. Why would I jeopardize my reputation? Right. If I'm selling crap, like people say it, like, well, how do I know people aren't selling crap? And I'm like, well, it's their actual name, their actual social medias are attached to it. Why do you think someone would risk their reputation? Like, I think about that logically. I would have to be the biggest dumbass in the world to sell you crap in hopes that you do support my tackle shop and book guide trips. Like, what sense in what world does that make? Yeah. So, it's like we vet these guys as good as we can, and then we also, their first time they post a tip, we do have a team on the back end that reviews that tip, and we'll say, hey, we think there should be more information, or hey, we noticed these price points. That price point is probably a little high for what you're selling. Because, all right, so this is going to lead into our review process. We've had a little bit of a struggle, just being 100% honest and candid with you guys. We've had a little bit of a struggle with the review process because we understand that some guys are coming in with different skill levels, different talent levels. I think the skill and talent different ability to work certain baits, different equipment from bass boats and canoes and everything. Mm-hmm. So, like if I'm selling you like, hey, they're in these shallow 1 foot flats with lily pads and you have a walleye deep V boat, you might rate the tip bad immediately because you can't even get to the darn fish, Yeah. So we're running into, go ahead.
Yeah, that was my, that was what I wanted to get into, is like the review process and kind of the back end of that, because you can validate so well, but if it's a local expert, they've got fish catchers on their Instagram, like how much can you really tell? Are they really dominating all these local lakes? Like we know some of the guys do around here. They don't really post on social media, but you can understand things like that happen around the country. Like on the back end review process, if there's an algorithm that kind of collates that, and obviously over time as you get more data you can
yeah, of course.
Yeah, let me I want to finish up on kind of the pre-vetting, and then we'll tap into the review process. So on that pre-vetting piece, just a few more tidbits. So that bank account thing Austin was talking about, I come from the credit card processing world where there is insane fraud globally. I mean, people try to cheat people out of money every single minute of every single day.
It's happening right now to me.
Like identity theft is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's brutal. And so from my credit card processing background, I learned a lot over the past 20 years about fraud prevention, monitoring risk, and things like that. So just the bank account thing is one tiny little step, but it's actually a big deal for fraud prevention. In regards to, before we tap into the review process, in regards to, what if the tip is junk, or what if it wasn't right? Look, we've been refunding people money because mistakes get made. We live in an imperfect world filled with imperfect people, and beginning with me and ending with Austin. And I mean, it's just the way the world works. Yep. We're not out to take anybody's money or do anything wrong or sell a bogus tip. If someone, we've had people send us, hey, here's customer support. This wasn't right. This wasn't right. This wasn't right. Oh, you're totally correct. Oh, we're sorry. Here's your money back. And now let's talk to the seller. And if the seller makes sense, then it's like, hey, let's try and correct these mistakes. The seller doesn't make sense. It's, hey, you're off the platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the way fraud prevention works, and credit card processing and risk monitoring and everything like that. So that is
Can I say
happening now.
something?
And
That segues into, let's say we do have a buyer who is upset at a tip, or, like, Lord knows, has a fisherman ever been pissed when he doesn't catch a fish? Yeah. So like that happens, right? But what we do is, like, if a buyer is upset about something, whatever it is, and then we're like, hey, this tip, based on our data, looks like it's, relatively priced right, valuable tip and everything. What we've done and had unbelievable success is literally saying, hey, we're going to facilitate you guys connecting and communicating with each other to reconcile what was wrong. So we've had a couple times, like, this is a great example. The other day, Jordan Sipek, who's at a Lake Oneida, his father, Stan Sipek, Bassmaster Classic qualifier, wins everything on Oneida. Jordan guides part-time out there. He's a stud. Anyways, he sells some walleye tips. He tells the guy,
hey, well, Austin, not only is he a stud, he represents the number one species category of selling tips on our platform, which is walleye.
Yeah.
It's not bass. Walleye tips are the number one selling species category so far.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah, it's just insane. So a guy reaches out, buys the tip, and then contacts us or he rates it a 1 out of 5. And I'm like, holy cow, like, Jordan has sold like 8 of these tips, and they've all been 4 or 5 out of 5 stars. So I'm like, hey, what was the deal? And he said, well, they weren't eating, the deal. So then I'm really good friends with Jordan. I don't know who the buyer of the tip was, but they came together, and Jordan ends up communicating. He goes, I told the guy, like, the exact jerkbait, the grass line, like everything. He said the guy just really liked throwing a silver buddy and wanted to catch him on a silver buddy.
Well, that brings up a very interesting point, because, and I'm glad to hear this working through on the back end, but we have a little saying here that fishing's fishational. Like, he can hammer him and give me the waypoint. Trademark.
That's ours, Austin. Let me steal that. Come on, man.
That is good.
But so, like, he can give me a waypoint. I go out the next day and they move, or they don't want to bite whatever they're biting, right? And it's good to hear, because I go back to the Florida example. A tip that's a week old in Florida in, say, February may be completely off of what they're doing, depending on those warm fronts or cold fronts, for that matter. Whereas a tip around here in the summertime, it could be maybe 3-4 weeks old, and there may still be fish around that general area where that tip is. It depends a lot on conditions, time of year, where you're at in the country, and probably not every angler that goes on there in some of these negative reviews, they understand all that, right? Because they're not out there all the time.
This is where I want to expand to even more, because, man, this is where I think a lot of the industry is and where they land on us. There's a saying, right? Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. I want to ask you guys, what do you think FishTips is?
I know more now, but I can tell you before I knew, and I'm not going to use your saying, because my saying is it's darn near impossible to catch another man's fish, right? When I first saw y'all's business and what you were doing, I said, they're just taking people's money, because you can't just get a waypoint and go catch somebody's fish. Okay. After having conversations with you, Austin, offline, now I understand a little more. But
that's how I felt. And Trey sent me when you were on Bass Talk Live. So I was actually on Bull Shoals, and so I listened to the podcast while I was fishing. I was like, okay, much different than all the clickbait,
all
stuff
the controversy
out there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, anyways, a lot of people are seeing this, and they're like, "Oh, this is a give a fish or give a man a fish, feed him for a day," and I'm like, no. This is teaching a man to fish, because this is why. One, Pete, you're 100% right. You can't catch another man's fish. But the other deal is they still have to earn it. But I want to go even further into they still have to earn it. This platform is an educational platform. Everyone pays for education. And our tips are more than just go to this waypoint, drag this worm, catch these big bass.
The tips are total. They're so in depth, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, like our guys who are good repeat sellers are like, hey, this is a good ledge. Sometimes these fish suspend above the ledge. Sometimes if it's a cool couple nights, they move to the grass shallower. Sometimes when it's warmer, they'll pull out off the ledge and move down to the secondary ledge. Like, it's so in depth and so educational. And it's, once again, if you're spending 2 or 3 hours on your YouTube channels watching, learning this stuff. This is just a quicker way to learn. And man, I heard a guy earlier on a different podcast that I did. He's like, man, he said, I love what you guys are doing. He goes, it's the information age. It's 2023. It's the information age. I think we're fools to think the information age wouldn't come to fishing too. And it is
Right.
like, this is education. And that's where I want people to realize we're not just the sell a waypoint platform. Like, this is an educational platform for a lot of guys. Like, I can't tell you how, I mean, honestly, I would be willing to bet 70% of the guide trips that I do with people are people that say, hey man, I just want to learn how you do it. And this is once again, just an extension of that exact service. So it's a very educational platform. That was kind of
it's the next step, I think, in the information age for the industry. So what, the last 10 years, YouTube exploded, social media, there's a lot of free content out there. I learned a lot of techniques right over the last decade, right, that I may never would have picked up. But this gets a lot more micro into a specifically body of water that is very applicable to when you're going out there. So like, you can learn as much as you want, but it does help. Now I'm drawing the blank on it, but it cuts the time it takes.
The learning curve.
Learning curve. That's exactly.
I mean, there's a lot of
I'm thinking for.
There's intuition that is laid out in the seller's tips, and you don't get that intuition a lot of times when you're watching a YouTube video or when you're reading an article or whatever the case may be. Is that, you can look at what is it, Bass Resource or whatever, and you can say, yep, usually in February they're in these creeks and blah 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 blah. But like, when you're actually selling like fishing intuition, that's something that's not, you don't see it all the time. A question I had, when a seller or when a buyer is going to buy a tip, it's just like a Yelp review, right? Everybody has a different palate, like tastes are all different, stuff like that. But is there a disclaimer in there that talks about like, hey, listen, like, everything is subject to change. It's always, and it's also subject to how you, what am I trying to say here? Digest the information, right? If you don't understand what you're reading, can you read? And if you can read, can you understand what you're reading? Because that's a big thing, right? Like terminology and verbiage that's being used. Do those buyers understand what they're reading?
I think it's no, go ahead and I'll answer. I'll give.
I was going to say, we have a cool little saying called, hey, it might not bite because it's fishuational. But,
here we go. Ben's
go ahead, Pete.
No, what I was going to say is you brought up a great point when you talked about, he gave that tip and he told him the jerkbait and everything, and he wanted to catch him on a silver buddy. And it just made me think, like, for anybody out there, our fans, new followers, whatever, if you're listening to this, if you buy a tip, listen to that tip. And I can give you a personal example for free tips. I had 2 people hit me up last week about a local lake. I told them both the exact same thing. There's a shad spawn still going on, which is completely and totally insane for this time of year. As soon as that shad spawn's done, you need to move and you need to go offshore. And depending on how those fish are set up, this is what you need to throw. One guy didn't listen to me about the shad spawn and didn't get there till 8:30 and then didn't understand why he wasn't catching fish shallow. The other guy got there at 5:30, smashed them shallow, and then went out offshore, figured out where they were set up. So if you buy a tip and you don't listen to that tip, they're giving you the information. You have to use that information nearly verbatim, because that's how you're going to learn. It's not, this is how you catch them. So if I'm catching them on a flutter spoon and you go out and you throw a deep diving jerkbait and you don't understand why they're not eating it, or chicken, whatever it is.
Flutter spoon's not a jigging spoon.
No, flutter spoon is not a jigging spoon. I just think that was a really good point that you brought up. And it is good to hear that there, people come on, they leave a negative review, that there is a process there to connect them with the guide, and a conversation is had. Like, this is what I provided you. What did you actually do?
Once again, like, when I think about our platform, I think what happens is there's a lot of projection of insecurities. And listen, we are our own people, so we only have our perspective. And immediately we always think, how is this going to affect me? But when people think about like our platform, they're immediately like, oh my gosh, this is kind of wild. But if you think about it, like, how we see it is a very beneficial transaction for two parties. That is what it is. It's a father and son like Strickland and Adam that have their own Z7 Nitro. I was out there all week last week. Adam doesn't even want to take money away from me. He knows I'm booked and can guide someone else. And he just like, hey man, I'll buy a tip. So it's all about like, we really at the core of this, we stand for honesty. We stand for integrity. We're not trying to take people's money. Of course, anytime you're a capitalist and come up with a busince idea, half the comments on social media are like, that's a greedy SOB. You know, it's like, no, like we first, how we see this platform is it is a beneficial transaction for two parties. And we're just trying to facilitate that. We're not trying to screw anyone. We don't want somebody to be pissed off. What sense would that make for us as a business if we just had everybody pissed off at what they were buying? That's a terrible business model.
First, for everyone, this is not new. Right. FishTips may be new, but paying for education is not new. How many people pay for a Bassmaster membership and get the Bassmaster magazines? A lot.
Bass University.
How many people pay for Bass University? How many people pay for Netflix? How many people pay for YouTube, whatever it is now? How many people pay to go to college? Right. And what I'm feeling here is there's a fish tip scholarship for Ben and Pete and myself here that, you know, based on this deal. So we're going to get it for free 99. But I think I think what people need to understand is like this is not a new concept. First, we live in capitalism. That's the opportunities that we have in this country to just create a business out of anything. If you find a niche, go for it, man. Shoot for the moon. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then, hey, hopefully you have resiliency to bounce back. But this isn't new. So I don't know. And I'm sure you guys have gotten some negative comments, and I want to dive into that. Mm-hmm. But this isn't new. This isn't new at all.
Not at all. Not at all. And I want to touch on that real quick. You know, it's as old as the internet and even older. But since the dawn of the influencer and the YouTube channels and sponsorships for people that are, you know, for influencers, you know, people are paying for their fishing tips. The same, they're paying for them now. They're probably paying the same exact amount of money. They're just receiving them in a different way, right? You're paying whatever fishing rod manufacturer and whatever, you know, resort in the Bahamas and whatever lure company for $10 for that lure, right? And then you've got the influencer, the person that's spending all that time making what people think are free videos. When they go research online, they're researching what they think are just, I can just follow this person on Insta and I can watch their TikToks and I can learn all this stuff and I can listen to their hour-long podcasts and them talk about all these things so that I can get this information. It's free. They're getting the same information, but that person's making their money from the sponsors. That person, the seller, is hoping that the rod manufacturer and the lure manufacturer will carve out a little piece of the $10 you paid them for that lure or the couple $100 you paid them for that rod and give it in return as their income so that the seller can continue to make their money and their revenue that way. We've just cut out the middleman, right? They're having to go around their ass to get to their elbow. Excuse my French. Just so they can generate the revenue. So
That's
they
not
keep
French.
making the free. Yeah, thank you. so that they can continue to make the free videos. We've just cut out that process and we've just said, hey, buyer, just give the money directly to the seller.
Yeah,
that's it.
And you use it. Go ahead.
Just on another note, talking about it's like it's not new in this industry. And this is where a lot of the heat came from on social media. I said, and I quote, everybody is getting information of some sort. I don't know. This is probably the clip you guys saw.
Oh, here we go.
That's one of them. Yeah.
Mark it 59 minutes and 4 seconds. He began the controversy.
Yep, I'm going to put that back. I'm putting that in my notes right now.
Everybody gets information. And Gerald Swindle picked that up. Jordan Lee picked it up. Alton Jones Jr. A lot of guys picked it up, and they're like, no. And I said, no. Listen. I didn't call anyone a cheater. I would never call anyone a cheater without proof. You know, I said everyone gets information. And here it is. If Gerald Swindle, if you guys owned a tackle shop, Gerald Swindle had a tournament in town. He walked into your tackle shop. Because of our natural human desire to be liked, we would say, hey, Gerald, I was out there and I called him like this the other day. Did Gerald get information?
Yes.
Listen, I love Ben Milken. He's one of my best friends. He's actually texting me right now. Him and his wife just had a baby girl.
Awesome.
He's been sending me pictures.
Is that breaking news? Breaking news.
anyways, anywhere Ben goes, people want to be liked by Ben Milken. So what is it? Hey, Ben, try over here, man. I caught a big one out here. Is Ben's getting information? I'm saying everybody gets information. What I don't like is the projection of these people that are like, what FishTips is doing is wrong. And I'm like, no. Listen, everybody's getting information. Just some have networks of who's best friends with Gerald Swindle, Jordan Lee, Alton Jones Jr., all these guys. Those are powerful networks, dude. And guess what? Adam doesn't have that network. Mm-hmm. You know, I know Jake Whitaker and Jonathan Kelly, Matty Wong, a couple of the other these guys, you know, but I'm like, people don't have my network. And that's what I'm saying is like, you can't say what FishTips is doing is wrong, because I'm like, everybody gets information. I said this. In fact, if you go fishing and you don't have information, you're probably an idiot.
Yeah.
Because you're watching the videos and you're reading up in magazines and you're listening to this podcast, and everything you're doing, someone else is paying those sellers. This is just a direct line to it. There's no real difference. And one little piece that we haven't touched on too is that ballpark, I've heard research shows that, you know, last year and the last 2 years, there's about 50 million fishermen and fisherwomen in the United States. You know, of that, how many of them are tournament anglers? Max 2 million, 2.5.
Yes,
max. So this is really the genesis of this idea is for the other 48 million of the meats.
That was going to be my question though, is who gets their panties in a bunch? Is it the other 48 million, or is it the 2 million of tournament anglers who have a problem and too much pride?
I wasn't going to say it.
No, I'm telling you right now.
But the reality is I understand a lot of their concerns. You know, a lot of them make sense in what they're doing with information and technology and the industry that they're in and the tournaments they're competing in. I understand their concerns, and I want to figure out how to take their concerns as feedback and make our platform better, and also figure out ways to help them combat their concerns in competitive environments that they're in. You know, we've even had one conversation around the chalkboard that was like, look, they brought up some valid concerns on the Bass Talk Live podcast that we did. Like what if tournament anglers did go to our site and buy a tip, and then, you know, within the period that they're not allowed to buy anything, or they're not supposed to be doing that before a tournament, we're like, well, how can we help them? How can we help that tournament to stop that from happening? And then we started contacting our attorney to say, hey, look, are we allowed to give the tournament body the information if they were to call us and say, hey, did this list of 200 fishermen, you know, buy anything from you in the last 2 weeks? Right? Like, we don't have the answer back on that yet, but those are the type of things that we do want to help with.
But dude,
you know?
like the answer to, in my opinion, is easy: integrity. I mean,
100%.
You're one website versus millions and millions of opportunities to go out there and elicit information and cheat.
Dude,
so it's
not quite. So the concern is, and I think this is a concern, right? It is getting non-public information. So YouTube, articles in magazines, all old coverage, right? Anyone theoretically could have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a fish tip on a particular lake and it's capped at a number, like some of them are, right, then only 5 people get it. And then the concern is, are people able to purchase that information that's non-public? And I'm with you 100% on integrity, right? But we know these organizations have an issue with that by what's going on the last couple of years. And so, yeah, that was my question. You guys have had the conversation of how do you have conversations with those organizations? And it's hard to do it, I know, for like a local.
Real quick before Adam, just real quick, I think, and I'm sure you all agree, and we've talked about it on some other podcasts, that this topic that we're going to right now, the industry fishing industry as a whole is hypersensitive because of the walleye incident and the way it got blasted out to the world and got brought to mainstream. So integrity is always something that everybody just assumed. Now that we've seen a major scandal, and there were some other ones in the BPT and bass that everybody knows about, but it's a hypersensitive topic right now. And so some of this may be overreaction because of that, but I definitely want to hear Austin and Adam.
So this is where it lands, because now we're talking, because this is what has happened. People are projecting their morality into something, and you have to be really careful when you do that. And I want an example right here. Is this iPhone a good iPhone or a bad iPhone?
It's based on your opinion.
Well, if I use it to cheat on my wife and sell drugs and do stuff with the cartel, is that the phone's fault or is that my fault?
Phone.
It's your
phone, man. It's his man. No,
I like it's the phone, baby. Hey, don't get mad at me. It was the phone
made me do it. No, it's you making that decision.
Once again, it's like, listen, like how we envision this platform is a guide being able to help some buddies coming in town and coming in town, getting some information to go make a memory. How people use the platform. Listen, are there going to be people that use this in a way that does not display integrity and so forth?
Yes.
Dude, yes.
Yeah.
Listen, I this is an extreme example. But it's a good example. I've got a gun over there. Is it a good gun or a bad gun? In my hands, it protects my house, my family, my business, my friends when I'm with them. In the hands of someone who wants to do something heinous, it's a tool for something that's destructive. I can't project my morality into an object that is just an object that is a tool to be used by people.
You just said the magic word there. It's a tool, and it's how an individual chooses to use the tool. It's not the tool's fault.
That's right. It's my prior industry credit card processing. I mean, are credit cards good or bad? Right? They're amazing. They've changed the world.
Amen. It's true.
Almost $6 trillion of payments will take place on credit cards globally. You would be mind blown at the hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud that take place that people try to commit through that platform. The credit cards aren't bad. It's what people choose to do with the credit cards.
Yeah. So I think a lot of this, and once again, it's this fear from tournament guys. And I'm going to say this. I think people tend to project their insecurities into other things. So they're like, people are going to use this to cheat. And I'm like, are you scared you're going to use this to cheat?
That's right.
Because I'm like, once again, how I intend to use the platform, it upholds what I stand for. Like, I'm a Christian, but I'm like, I stand for integrity, honesty, truthfulness. Like, that's what I stand for. Like, this is going to be extension of that, just like my businesses, like my houses, like everything in my life. Ultimately, oh man, I heard something the other day. Somebody said how people perceive themselves is often how they perceive the world.
It's correct.
It is 100% correct. And I'm like, there are people that are willing to do shady things to get ahead of people. And listen, like Adam said earlier, man, we're broken people. Everyone has dirt. No one's perfect. Like, we're all broken. But like, at the end of the day, like, it's not the platform. When Airbnb made Airbnb, like, my wife and I have Airbnbs. If someone wanted to rent our house for a month and turn it into a prostitution ring and a drug house, is that Airbnb's fault or my fault?
Nope.
No, I'm like, I just have a house. We just have a platform. So I know a lot of people are projecting insecurities, but it's like, listen, like, the way the fundamental purpose of this platform was to help guys make memories on the water and support fishing guides and other people who desire to make a little bit of secondary income, secondary revenue off of their love for fishing. That is literally where the ship lands and takes off from.
And here's the beautiful thing. It's like anything in the world. If you don't like it, you don't have to go to the site. Mm-hmm. If you don't like pizza, don't eat pizza. If you don't like bass fishing, don't go bass fishing. If you don't like fish tips, don't go to the website. Right. And so everybody has control over what they do. It's though, and I agree with you. Like those who think about it the most, if you're already trying to think like, how could I use this to my advantage in a tournament? Then you've already cheated. Like you're already on that road of like doing something immoral or unethical. And it's just a matter of time before you get caught. And for the tournament anglers that, maybe the industry is worried about, like those anglers tapping into that resource. Well, listen, man, they already get polygraphed randomly. They are already given clear and concise guidance on what not to do during the off limits period with no information and stuff like that. So it applies. So there's no change, literally virtually no change. It's just another opportunity for somebody to have enough rope to hang themselves with. Right?
It's very interesting with the backlash too. And I just sit here thinking about, you're in other species too. You talked about fish tips and walleye. It's actually the best selling species.
Crappy tips. We sell the crap out of crappy tips.
Crappy tips. and
Trademark.
And I know those tournaments associated with those species too. But you talk about scaling the saltwater and other species, but the fishing industry, I think you mentioned earlier, is still 70% driven by bass fishing, which bass fishing is still driven by tournament fishing.
That's right.
And let's all admit it. Tournament anglers can be whiny. Yeah. Very, very whiny. We hear it all the time at the local
We just hired an intern from a sorority at Georgia, and she said that fishermen are more dramatic than any sorority house she's ever been to at Georgia.
I would agree with that.
Write that down.
I would agree with
record that one. Yeah.
I say it all the time.
That's a good hot take right there. I like it.
Yeah, thanks. You're welcome. Just throw more heat on me, please.
Yeah, no, that was all Austin.
It's all good. It's all publicity. It's all good. So I have to ask, if there was one negative review, what was it? Like, what is the worst thing that you guys have heard that you never expected to hear out of Fish Tips? Not from a buyer, but just out of like somebody in the industry.
Like, what's the worst?
Okay.
Like,
what shocked you?
Adam wouldn't necessarily know this because Adam, is investor of the company, chairman of our board. He's not in the day-to-day grind like I am. But Gerald Swindle got on a podcast with the Alabama Bass Council. I said,
"Oh man!"
I said, "Did you guys watch that? By the way,
no. But
I'm going to watch it after this.
It's going to be great."
So, anyways, he said, "You have put my life and my." He essentially said we had put his life in jeopardy. And I'm like, all right, how have we done this? And he said that people are going to try to attempt to steal his graphs and sell them on our platform. So now, Pete, listen, you can laugh. I care about Gerald Swindle. In fact, one of my very best friends is the Black Rifle Coffee guy, Paul Bork. So he kind of is Gerald Swindle's boss in a sense of marketing / partner, whatever. I'm listening to Gerald and I'm like, all right, let me comprehend this. And I'm like, first off, I want to break it down. That was probably the most crazy thing. I'm like, that's pretty wild to say. But I said, Gerald, you run around in a very loud boat wrap. I said, every time you're on Gunnersville, everybody and their mama is toggling where you are and dropping a waypoint.
Yep.
Because what he was scared of is he said, I don't want someone to steal my graphs and be a verified seller on your platform and then sell all my stuff. And I'm like, dude, there's already people that are technically monetizing your stuff, whether they're fishing guides. There was a fishing guide I know who said, I don't like fish tips, but I do zoom in on other people's Instagram pictures to figure out where they're fishing. And I'm like,
you just like free fish tips then?
Yeah. You just don't want to pay somebody for their work.
You just like socialist fish tips.
Yeah.
So,
let me write that down in my notes. That's a good one.
Yeah. But I'm like, I care about these guys. So here's the deal. I told Jared, I'm like, listen, someone can't get on our platform and say, this is Gerald Swindle's 10 hot spots. I followed him around. That is immediately, we see these tips and that's taken down. Now listen, if I became a guide on Lake Gunnersville and I caught some fish off of some ledges and whatever and sold them, guess what? Gerald Swindle's lived on Gunnersville for 20 years. Does he probably have those waypoints?
Good chance.
So am I monetizing his waypoints? I'm like, this is already happening. A good little story real quick. I had a customer come in the store the other day and he's like, dude, he goes, I don't know why everyone's so upset about FishTips. I was like, I don't know. I think it's a lot of insecurity currently. And he goes, I had a buddy take me to Lake Chattooga and tell me, he showed me 2 brush piles, said they're super secretive. No one knows them. Keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anyone. I was like, okay, cool. He goes, well, I bought a boat from South Alabama and the guy sold me the boat with the electronics. And when I went to Chattooga, guess what waypoints were on that spot?
2 secret brush piles.
2 super secret brush piles.
So I'm like, guys, like we live in this, and I'm going to say this is going to be a hot topic. There are no secrets in fishing. It has to
100%.
do with most current, hyper local, hyper focused, hyper current information. And that's where the strength of FishTips is for the buyer and the sellers. Like, hey, I can give you this information. I was literally just out there 6 hours ago. Let me give you this tip. And that's where it is. Like these fish move. I mean, it happens all the time. There's so many conditions that change and everything. But this is what I know. There are people that have more confidence going out with a guide telling them how to go do something than they have confidence in their own ability.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's just the reality. There's people who have more confidence buying a tip or having a guide tell them what to do than they have confidence in themselves. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. They're lawyers. They probably have more confidence talking to a judge than I do when I get a speeding ticket. It's what they do. There's nothing wrong with that. We're just trying to facilitate confidence.
And how many of us have been out, right? And you get on fish. Maybe you're running a stretch of bank or something. Just happened to Trey and I on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
We were running around trying to find some fish. We got on a section of bank that's where they were. We caught one off of every cypress tree we flipped off, pretty much. And I'm like, well, we're going to run this, and then we're just going to come back and run it. Before I could loop back around, there were 3 boats behind me because they saw us catch those fish. It's not a secret. Somebody's going to see you. They're either going to waypoint it or they're going to jump right behind you. And if they're confident in fishing behind you, they're going to jump and fish behind you. Even if they're not, well, now they know I caught fish there. They're going to be there tomorrow morning. You're absolutely right. And that's one of the things that kills me. We talk about all the time when people's like, oh, don't tell anybody about this. This is my secret spot. Bro, there are no secrets. Somebody has seen you. Somebody has seen somebody catch a fish.
I told Gerald that. I'm like, Gerald, you guys have marshals in the boats with you at elite events. And which have tracking devices. I can get on a satellite and literally zoom into where you are on Google Earth. Like I don't want to say this in a negative way, but I'm like, I think a lot of people just live in this, I don't want to say fantasy world, but I'm like, guys, this is just how you perceive it. Like nothing's a secret. Like people know where you fish. You run a wrapped boat. You just can't hide from people. And listen. I have utmost respect for Gerald. Gerald was just someone who obviously had made the video coming back with FishTips on on TikTok. So he's been a lot of the talk. And then he hopped on the live stream with the Alabama Bass Council. So I know Gerald's name's been coming up a bunch. I have utmost respect for Gerald. I've talked to Gerald personally. Gerald and I are cool. I'm just saying he's been coming up. But it doesn't matter who it is. There's just zero secrets, and this is just the reality of what we live. I don't know if you guys remember when Kevin Van Dam won Toledo Bend, and he literally looked at the camera. This is what he looked like. I've got to catch all these fish because there's 55 spectator boats that are about to drum them if I don't catch every fish. That's happening. And guess what? Were some of those people watching him maybe fishing guides on Toledo Bend?
Yeah,
I have a funny one. In one of these podcasts, this is probably one of the craziest things that I've heard someone try and throw a stone at FishTips. In one of Austin's podcasts, someone said, so do y'all have can y'all see and do you access all of the tips that people are posting on FishTips? And Austin was like, yeah, of course.
It's our website.
He's like, well, yeah, he's like, it's our business. And he's like, well, you think what you could do with that data, y'all could steal that information. And I mean, he went off on all the horrible things you could do with data. I wasn't on the podcast. I was just listening, but I was like, in my head, I was like, do you have any idea every time you open a bank account, every time you go get a credit card, do you have any idea how much tracking is going on there? They know where you are, when you're there. They know what you eat, when you eat it. They know what hotels you stay at. They know, I mean, the amount of data that exists on people right now is mind blowing. And do banks do illicit and horrible things with your data? No, there's laws against that.
Mhm.
Do credit card companies do anything with your personal social security numbers and your bank accounts? No, of course not. The same reason that Uber doesn't and Airbnb doesn't, and the same reason we're not. We're a business. We're in the business to try and make this business grow.
For all you doomsday preppers, the jig is up. All
Yeah,
right. Like the jig is up, like it's 2023, like get over it. I think tournament anglers specifically, and I'm a local tournament angler. I'm no professional by any means, but I think the term grow the industry is only, I think they want to grow the industry when it's time to make money for themselves. This is just total speculation, but growing the industry means you're giving information out. You're giving techniques, you're giving capabilities out. Those fish that you thought only you and yourself could catch are being caught by other people now. So I think growing the industry really came back to bite the industry in the butt, the tournament anglers, because there are so many more people on the water now. Bass fishing is so much more popular. And we're talking bass fishing, right? There's so much other fishing out there, but it just seems to always circle around bass tournament anglers. It just always does. And so when we say grow the industry, we really don't. What we want is to protect what we can catch, but give just whatever else we can give. That's not how it works, man. Like
I want to talk.
It's very unique because, you know, the focus here is what, like you just said, on bass fishing and the information. You'll hear a lot of people say, well, I've spent my whole life learning that information, right? Those are, I learned that. I spent in thousands of hours and thousands of dollars to figure out how to catch those fish. Therefore, how dare someone else ask me for that? And I would never give them that. But it's kind of interesting. It's like this industry is still kind of like analog, and it's moving into this digital age, because think of all the other different spaces in the world that aren't even in necessarily the digital age. But what if a car mechanic said the same thing, and your car is broke and you took it into the shop and he said, nope, I only work on my own cars.
Yeah.
I went to school and I learned how to fix these combustible engines, and I'm not giving you that information. That's mine. And what if doctors said that? Said, no,
Right.
I became a doctor just for my family, and that's it. I'm only going to feed my family with my knowledge, and I'm only going to keep my family healthy. I'm not going to share that knowledge. So it's still just a unique space.
Austin, you said it earlier. You don't just guide. You don't just have a tackle store. You have multiple sources of revenue, and you're seeing, and tournament anglers have to as well. They're professional marketing and sales representatives. They're professional fishermen. A lot of them are professional guides. They got private businesses. And guess what they're doing now? Everyone's jumping on the YouTube train. They're all starting a series. They're all giving information to everybody. Right.
And they're doing that so that a sponsor will give them the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
it's the same thing here. This just alleviates the sponsor train.
It's just
go directly
different
to the money.
It's all the same stuff, but it is interesting.
One point real quick.
Absolutely.
Because I think it goes back to even something that's like I keep thinking about what we are, and we are humans and everything, but it goes back to like even deeper, because I think so much is like mentality and so forth. But there's these two mentalities, right? There's an abundance mentality, and then there's a scarcity mindset, right? You got an abundance mindset and a scarcity mindset. And an abundance mindset says, hey, there's enough for everybody. There's enough to be successful. That's what I think. When I think growing the industry, I think about having an abundance mindset. I mean, dude, I'm guiding a kid Monday. This is unbelievable. I'm guiding a kid Monday who I guided when he was 8 years old.
Wow.
8 years old. I actually, he goes, dude, he was my second ever trip. I started my LLC 10 years ago. I guided him 12 years ago, dude. I think he's 21 now. He's like, dude, I love fishing because of you. Like, I watch all your YouTube videos. He's like, and to me, man, I'm like even kind of getting emotional. Like, man, that's what it's about. Like, he got his dad into fishing. Him and his dad have got to share lifetime memories because I got the son into fishing. So when I think about growing the industry, it's about this abundance mentality. Like, it's about inspiring kids, man. Like, dude, when I got to share a boat with Boyd Duckett, I was blown away. And just even to this day, I could call Boyd and just talk shop with him or whatever. But like, there's abundance mentality and there's scarcity mentality. And there's so many people that just think there's enough of this little piece of the pie for me and me and me and me, that they just totally, and listen, dude, I'm being 100% honest. What you put out into the world is what you get back from the world. And there might be some people living behind a facade of fakeness, but the reality is if you're putting positivity out, you're going to get positivity back. And I'm like, once again, when I think about the core foundation of what we've created, it's literally about maximizing your life as a guide, maximizing your life as a father and son, maximizing your life as a friend, maximizing your life as a local tournament guy that wants to pay enough fish tips to take his honey on vacation, whatever it is. Like, we exist to see people maximize their life. That's what Fish Tips is about. Point, end of story, game over. Like,
I love it. Absolutely love it. And if you two don't have any other questions, I think we can just end the Fish Tips conversation right there, because I mean, how do you cap what they're doing better than that? I mean, that's exactly how I see it now, even before you talked about that. That is,
I appreciate that.
That's perfect.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. I mean, if you listen to this and that doesn't put things into perspective, you might want to do some inward reflection, some soul searching, and question, where your heart or mind or whatever it is really lies, because that's awesome, man. And I think about the memories I've made with my dad, and you created those same opportunities for that kid just by taking him on a guide trip and showing him a good time. Like, that's unbelievable. And if selling a fish tip can do that for somebody, because there's plenty of kids out there whose dads don't fish, but they might have $100 to buy a tip to go rent a boat on a public lake where you might be able to rent a pontoon boat, and they can go out there with their old man and they might catch a 5-pound bass. And then next thing you know, they got a boat and they're out there doing it every weekend.
It happened this weekend. I sold a tip this weekend. We've been catching, and I don't know if you guys follow the Dream Catchers channel, but a lot of people know us for big swim baiting. A kid had reached out and said, "Hey man, I'm coming to Lake Glenville. What's the deal?" And I said, "Can I sell you a fish tip?" And he said, I don't have the money. I said, "Listen, I understand you're a young kid." I said, I'm a professional guy. This is how I put food on the table for my family." And he goes, "I got my dad to buy the fish tip." And I said, "Awesome, man." So his dad bought the fish tip. They had a little 16-foot tracker, 60 horsepower. They ended up buying the fish tip. They said, "Man, we have this one swim bait," and they followed my tip to a T. The kid caught his PB, a 5.5 pounder, and the dad caught his PB, 5.5 pounder, in the same day. And the dad ends up messaging me on Instagram and says, "Best day I've ever had with my son."
There you go.
That is awesome.
That's absolutely creating opportunities to capture those memories, man. Goodness.
Yep.
It's amazing opportunities. So we, I don't have any other questions. I appreciate you guys breaking it down.
We know fishtips.com, right? There's a mobile app as well, I believe.
So it is currently a progressive web app. So it's fishtips.com. You can, I don't know if you know how to make something look like an app on your home screen. You can hit share and add to home screen. So it comes up just like an app. Look, solid iPhone right here. I'm touching my screen.
Did your wife just shoot a chicken?
There's definitely a gunshot, but that's because we live in the woods. So we're good.
So, but anyways, there's a way to make it look like a pop-up app right there by just hitting add to home screen.
Awesome.
But,
and you can follow at Get Fish Tips on everything, right?
On Instagram, TikTok. We have a YouTube channel. We're about to start utilizing that as an educational platform for our sellers, and some marketing content just overall. But yeah, man, we're in the infancy stage of this. There's a lot of great data and metrics around it. And like I said, I mean, I think Adam and I and our other co-founder Cal, we really feel like this can change the world for in a positive way, and that's why we're doing it. So
that's awesome. Any other plugs you want to throw? I mean, I'm perfectly good if you want to talk about your guide business, your store, anything that you want to throw out there, Adam.
Yeah, dreamcatchersfishing.com is our online tackle store. Dreamcatcher Guides is my guide business. We're running trips. We got the boys running 2 trips tomorrow. Dad's doing 2 installs on boats, and I'll be cold calling saltwater and inshore guides, telling them we have this awesome platform for them to make secondary revenue. But it's Dreamcatchers on the YouTube channel. And then, so that's Dreamcatchers.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we got a booth at ICAST coming up in a couple weeks, so we can set up meetings or see anybody there as well and do demos of the platform.
Yeah.
And other than that, I really appreciate you having us on here. Thank you all for your time.
Absolutely. And anybody that's coming to ICAST that wants to schedule with you, what's the best way to contact you? Through social medias or?
Yeah, reach out to Austin.
Okay. Yeah, Austin. Yep, Austin at FishTips.com. They can email me directly and get on our docket and sit down and talk.
And I'll have this link below. I'll put all their socials in there. All those links will be in the description of the video or the audio, depending on how you take in our content. These folks have created a platform. They're living what we talk about all the time. We want to build a culture of anglers helping anglers, one cast at a time.
That's right.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Yeah. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.